Stop! Don't put in your offer yet until you follow these rules. Quick heads up, it's better to click the link in the description. Now we're going to use Lendlord, which is my preferred provider for the rest of this video. So open it up, set up your account with the link. So let's jump in. For the first thing I'm looking at is the foundation. So we're setting the foundations of our strategy first of all. This is really important. Before I'm putting in any offer, I need to think of the end in mind. Let me say a flip, for example. If a flip is where you're buying, refurbishing and selling the property, well, I need to know the first thing is my profit margin. So if I know my profit margin on a flip is going to be 15%, then I'm going to go in with that offer reflecting that 15% profit first. A lot of people don't do that. I'll just tell you exactly what that looks like. So if it's a £200,000 end value of the property, I'm going to take 15% off that, which is 30,000. Then I'm at 170. Then I'm going to take off the refurbishment, let's say 20, so I'm at 150. Take off 10 grand for fees, for example, I'm at 140, and that's what I can purchase the property at. So ignore the numbers, more the premise. Whereas most people go out kind of blind, going, hey, what would you sell this property for? Is that a good deal? Well, that's not a great way of approaching it. Whereas with a buy-to-let, and my favorite strategy is boring vanilla buy-to-let properties, then I'm really looking at the long-term fundamentals, which brings me on to point number 2, which is understanding your market. So when I'm looking at market dynamics, I'm looking at the overall economics that's going to impact the economy of my property. And I do this through macro, micro, and forced inflationary measures. What does this mean? Well, you've got the macro economy. So these are things like interest rates going on. Is it Conservative or Labour in government right now? I know other parties are there, but the two big ones. What's going on in London versus Leeds? What transport center? All of that sort of thing. So I'm looking at the macroeconomics of going, is now a good time to buy in property? In short, by the way, yes, very obviously now is an incredible time to invest in property. Once I've covered the macro, I then go into the micro. So the microeconomy of what's going on right now within your location, within your strategy, and within property as a sector. And we can look at things such as EPCs. Well, EPCs, energy performance certificates, don't impact stock prices all that much, believe it or not. But all of these things that directly relate. I'm also going to be looking at logistically what's happening in the economy. So how many people are in Leeds, for example. I'm saying Leeds because that's one of my main areas. How many people are in Leeds versus properties available, because that's going to give me an overall supply versus demand. Finally, I'm looking at forced market metrics. And this is stuff that's around where the long-term capital growth from property is about 7.9% per annum, and I want to see what can I do to positively manipulate that? What can I do to positively impact that as much as possible? Well, one of the things is I can look at what would force up the value of a property. Well, obviously, if there's a massive move by a big company. For example, in Leeds, Channel 4 has moved from London to Leeds, so their HQ is up here, creating thousands of new jobs. You've also got the South Bank development, which is a South Bank development of Leeds, which is the area of over 180 football pitches. It's the second largest development, residential development in the whole of Europe. That's hospitals, schools, new bloody roads everywhere. It's extending the city centre, and that is what we get forced inflation. So before you even put in your offer, you need to be thinking, if it's a short-term strategy, it's about that supply versus demand. If it's a longer-term strategy, you really want to be focused on those forced market things. So people go, should I look for discounts on properties? Well, you know, if you can get a discount on a strong area, great. But in the best areas, you're not getting a discount. You're just not. You are getting the best inflation, okay? And capital growth is the main infiltrator to your positive results. So that's what we want to be focusing on from a market point of view. Section 2, I want to cover my rules for looking at property, and these are 3 simple steps. But number 1, don't forget the profit. I know that sounds so obvious, but a lot of people, when they're looking at, for example, a boring vanilla buy-to-let, go, how much am I renting it for? And it's like, yeah, that's a yield. That's a direct return on your investment going in. But that's not what really makes money in property. And people think this is kind of strange, but that is taxable income. There's 3 real ways, well, there's 4, but we'll go through the top 3 three ways of making money is rent, rental increases, and of course capital appreciation. Rent is decent, yeah, that's getting your cash flow. Rental appreciation or rental increases, usually between 4 and 9% increases per annum, but your real money is done in capital growth, and people don't actually factor that into the profit, except for the fact that's the only one of your profit that is tax free. So assess your profit properly. Number two is factoring your refurbishment cost. And I don't just mean, oh yeah, it's got a refurb, but I see it so many times where the property's looking fine, but they've put 0 as a refurb because it's tenanted. It's like, well, if that tenant moves out, what do you think you need to spend on it? And that's what I'm always saying to my team when we're pricing up for our investors and myself is, if that tenant moved out a day later, what would we have to spend on the property? And it might only be £2,000, by the way, but always factor that in. On the other side, make sure you're pricing up properly. The amount of times I've seen people go, yeah, it's about 10 grand. Oh, it's 10 grand. Don't know why. It's about 10 grand. It's like, no, it's not. It's 17,600. Okay. And little things like that have a dramatic impact because it's cash. And what I mean by that is when we're purchasing property, a majority of the time, we're going to leverage it. So we're going to purchase with a mortgage, and the mortgage is going to put in 75%. Typically, you're going to put in 25%. So your return on cash is leverage. However, with a refurbishment, that's not leverage. That is cash that you're needing to put in. So every pound is a prisoner in property. You want to make sure you got your numbers right. Number three, make sure to get direct comparables. Now, this is on an area by area basis. There are some locations where you can definitely go half a mile out. It's no problem at all. But there's other locations in Leeds, for example, where honestly, one side of the street is completely different. An example in Leeds is Hare Hills. Hare Hills, if you say Hare Hills locally, it's a bit of a rough area, but it's not actually. It's really rough here and actually a very good investment there, dependent on what side of the road you go on, right, and how far you go down. So it's really important to understand your numbers and get direct comparables. The amount of times people send me through properties to sell to my investors or buy myself, and they'll go, yeah, I've got a comparable down the road. It's like, have you looked at the square footage of that property? Because that is massive in comparison to your property. Or, yes, it is a 3-bed semi-detached, but look at the outside. That looks like an ex-council house. That looks like a footballer would live in it. Okay, and you really need as direct comparables as you can possibly get. Now, section 3 is now we've got all of this, how can we leverage sophisticated analyzers to make sure we've got the most accurate data possible? And here's where I want you to open Lendlord on another screen. So if you haven't got it yet, use the link below because you can get all of their premium features for free for the next 90 days. And a majority of it is free for you anyway. So click on that. Let's go through this together. So we jump into Lendlord. As I said, I am a massive fan of this. It can do multiple things from investing, managing, and financing your deal, which is an absolute game changer in my opinion, having a one-stop shop. But I want to show you how to use this. So now that we've got all this information, I'm going to go on invest, go down to rental, and really want to map out a predictable property or a very average property. So I won't put in the address. I guess I could, to be fair. So let's say I put in 130,000 as a purchase price. We'll put the value of the property at 130. I'm going to put this in relatively quickly as we're going through. So we got 130k there. Expected monthly rent on this, we're going to go for 750, which is roughly a 7% yield. Refurb cost of this of £8,000. And then closing costs, we're going to go with 1,600, sorry, on that. So we're going to go down to the loan to value, which is going to be 75% on this property. So it means we're going to get a loan of £97,500. Mortgage rate about 5.5% is what we're going to look at. And then we're going to put mortgage fee to 0 because it's going to be incorporated in there. All right. So on the rental side, what we're going to do is make sure we've got some operating expenses. So we're going to look at a managing fee of 10%, £75. Obviously, you can change it. There's not any service charge, anything like that. And let's put in another, say, £35 roughly for the maintenance. Now, I always put inflation to 0. Now, people always go, you should adjust for inflation, but actually, inflation is applied to everything. So either you apply it to absolutely everything you do. So if you're comparing property against stocks against cash, then you should apply the same inflation to everything. So my logic is don't apply it to anything, and it goes through there. Now, in my areas, I'm really looking at a 7.5% long-term capital appreciation, rental appreciation of about 5% in there, and occupancy rates of 95%. And this is really important, by the way, because if you look at your first year metrics, and this is how to really get the most out of this, is if we look at these first year metrics up here, we can see that we're netting 1,800 a year, which is only a 4.05% cash on cash return. It's not exactly a huge return. However, if we look here, over a 10-year period, we're getting a 358% return, or a yearly 18.52%. So it's called the IRR, internal rate of return, which is the total return on an annual basis. Now, the cool thing about this, by the way, is you can download this, you can present it, you can share the analysis, but also if you go on the holding period breakdown, so just click that button there, it really does give a huge breakdown of the property value at the end of year one. The mortgage balance naturally doesn't change, but the equity grows and it grows and it grows as we're going through. So suddenly, in year one, whilst we've got 42 grand, in year 10, we've got £170,000 of equity. So again, what you can see here is a huge portion of your wealth comes from the capital growth in property. And this is a typical property in my areas. And of course, the game is, how do you find areas like this where you're taking advantage of the macroeconomic factors, the microeconomic factors, and the local ones where you can manipulate or influence the outcome through forced capital appreciation. The other thing that I really love, by the way, is when you're factoring in your details here, and you're analyzing your deal, you can use this button here to finance the deal. And the more time you spend on this, and you can get initial rates there, you can see 4.69%. I actually use Landlords, and you can use it as a digital online broker, and it gives you the top three there. So you got Precise, the mortgage lender, and the mortgage works for this example. And then what you can do is look at more products. So that's not the purpose of this video, but what I wanted to show you is you can use this tool to really give yourself a breakdown. You can also make it a lot better with the refurbishment, give a full works plan and break through that. And then you can go through what if scenarios and break everything else down. So as you can see, you can spend your time building these complex spreadsheets, but ultimately what I do is I use Landlord. They're a sponsor of the channel. I've been working with Abby, the owner of Landlord, and Landlord for over a year now, and honestly, they blow me away. It really is your one-stop shop for almost everything in property. So make sure you're using their analyzers, and make sure to check out the tools that I covered on the video walkthrough. If you found value from this video, make sure to hit the like button. If you are new to the channel, of course, hit the subscribe and the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.